Patch 6 just dropped for Menace, and I'm gonna be straight with you. Some things that were broken finally work the right way, but the game has also set some traps that are gonna catch a lot of people off guard. I learned the hard way. You don't have to. So let's get straight to the point. 7 things you can start using with confidence, and 3 changes that look neutral in the changelog, but will cost you a mission if you don't pay attention. Before patch 6, you probably noticed something was wrong with enemy behavior. Pirates and other factions would simply run away from your units even without having the slightest clue they were there. It was that weird situation where stealth worked too well, not because of your skill, but because the AI was basically afraid of ghosts. This completely broke the tension that a tactical game should have. The problem went beyond just making things too easy. When the AI flees from something it hasn't even detected, it's reacting to information it shouldn't have. This destroyed any sense of immersion and made tactical planning feel somewhat useless because you didn't really need to set up an elaborate ambush. You just had to position your units in stealth mode and watch the enemies scatter on their own. That's not strategy, it's an exploit. With the fix, stealth now requires you to actually think before you act. Your enemies will continue their patrol normally until the moment you decide to attack, which means timing and positioning have started to matter for real. You need to calculate who gets taken out first, which unit engages, and how to keep the rest of the group unalerted. It's that kind of tension that makes you hold your breath before confirming a move. Honestly, this is exactly the kind of fix that elevates a game. It's not new content, it's not a new system, it's simply making what already exists work the right way. Menace always had the potential for solid tactical combat, and now stealth finally counts as a real tool, not a loophole. If you gave up on the game because you found it too easy, this patch deserves a second chance from you. Let's talk about Tekobeo, because after this patch, this guy has become a problem, and I say that with all the respect in the world. His perk, Get Motherfucked, already had a name that promised a lot, but in practice, it was underutilized, restricted to a few special weapons, without much real impact on the battlefield. It was that classic situation of a character with huge potential held back by arbitrary design limitations. The change that arrived now is simple on paper, but absurd in practice. He can now fire tripod weapons from the hip without needing to set anything up. No assembly, no stopping. Imagine yourself running across the map and firing a heavy minigun or a rocket launcher as if it were a common rifle. It's the kind of thing that makes no sense in the real world, but within a tactical game, it creates that sense of power that makes you give a crooked smile as you watch everything explode around you. What makes Tekobeo truly scary isn't just this new mobility, it's the numbers behind it. With 100 AP, 75 toughness, and 70 vitality, he's not just fast and destructive, he's tough enough to get into direct contact with the enemy and walk away. Add to that, Linebreaker giving a stun on charge and Die Hard reducing incoming damage, and you have a squad leader who literally solos missions with aggressive builds without needing any babysitting. This is the kind of buff that redefines how you build your squad. Before, you probably used the Tech SL as support, or kept him in a safe position. Now, he is your spearhead, the unit you send first into the chaos while the rest of the team positions itself. If you haven't tested aggressive builds with him after the patch, you're leaving one of the most fun experiences in Menace completely on the table. It seems like a small thing until you stop to think about how much visual detail matters in a tactical game. Laser rifles in Menace always had that classic problem of a generic effect that didn't differentiate anything, whether it hit metal, flesh, or concrete. The visual feedback was practically the same. In intense combat, especially when the screen is full of units and projectiles at once, this lack of feedback created real confusion about what was happening. Now, each surface has its own visual impact. A laser hitting metal armor reacts differently than one hitting an organic enemy, and this distinction seems simple, but completely changes how you read the battlefield. Instead of tracking HP bars or floating numbers all the time, you start using the effects themselves as tactical information. It's the kind of design that works silently to pull you deeper into the game without you consciously realizing it. This becomes even more evident in the varied biomes of the Wayback System. Planets with different environments, different textures, and different materials, and now the laser responds to all of it coherently. When you're on a planet with industrial metal surfaces, the impacts have that look of heat and distortion that fits the environment. It's visual feedback working with the world around it, not against it. You know that moment when you stop in the middle of a mission just to look at something the game did visually? This patch created a few of those moments with the laser rifles. It's not new content, it's not a new mechanic, it's real polish. The kind of work that separates a game that works from a game that feels good. And in a tactical title where you spend hours analyzing every detail on the screen, this kind of care makes all the difference in the overall experience. There's one thing that separates a generic enemy from an enemy you actually respect, and it's usually not how much damage they deal, it's presence. The heavy pirates in Menace were always visually imposing heavy armor, improvised weapons, that look of a faction that survived in space through brute force. But before patch 6, they arrived on the battlefield almost in silence, and that took away a lot of the weight they should have had. The new barks changed this directly. Grunts when they absorb damage, taunts when they advance, realistic reactions during a firefight. These things seem like details until you're in the middle of intense combat and hear a heavy pirate reacting to what's happening around him. Suddenly, he stops being just a sprite with tank stats and starts looking like a real threat, something that is actively trying to kill you and isn't afraid of you. This type of addition fits perfectly into the grimdark tone of Menace. The game isn't about heroes saving the day with epic speeches. It's about brutal conflict in a hostile universe where everyone is one step away from death. When the heaviest enemies of the pirate faction start vocalizing that brutality, the entire world feels more cohesive. It's not just audio, it's environmental storytelling being built while you play. What I like about this change is that it shows attention to the four factions as distinct entities. The heavy pirates have a strong visual identity, and now they have a compatible sonic identity. When you face them in a tight map, the auditory pressure adds to the tactical pressure, and that combination is exactly what a heavy combat game needs to keep you in the right state of alert at all times. Tactical planning is only as good as the clarity of the information you have on screen. The dice, Menace's planning tool, has always been one of the most interesting elements of the game precisely because it forces you to think before you act, assemble squads, decide on vehicles, calculate orbital support. The problem is that when the HUD is poorly positioned and overlaps start to pile up, this planning stops being strategic and becomes a battle against the interface itself. Before patch 6, managing procedural operations and branching ops in the dice was functional but uncomfortable. Important information was hidden or blocked by UI layers that overlapped at the wrong time. When you're trying to coordinate tanks, mechs, and orbital support from the TCRN impetus all at once, any pixel of confusion on the screen has a real cost on your decisions. And in missions with branches, where every choice has a consequence, misreading information can compromise the entire operation. The positioning change resolves this directly. The HUD is now where it should have been from the start, legible, without competing with the rest of the screen. It seems like an obvious fix when you see it working, but it's exactly the kind of adjustment developers sometimes put off to prioritize other things. When it finally arrives, you realize how much you are adapting your playstyle to compensate for a design problem that shouldn't have existed. What this means in practice is that you can finally use the dice the way it was intended to be used. Faster decisions, cleaner field reading, and that sense of real control over your squad and resources. In a game where pre-mission planning is a central part of the experience, having the interface work for you instead of against you isn't a detail. It's the difference between feeling like a commander or feeling lost in a screen full of useless information. If there's one thing that breaks a tactical game faster than any bug, it's a predictable AI. When you already know exactly how the enemy will react to every situation, combat stops being a challenge and becomes a sequence of memorized movement. Menace always had real tactical ambition, but the AI still carried behaviors that you learned to exploit after a few hours. And that took away the tension the game clearly wanted to create. Patch #6 continues the work of making this AI more honest. Combined with the fleeing fix we saw earlier, enemies now flank more consistently, react to stealth coherently, and, most importantly, punish mistakes. This last point is what really changes the experience. When you mess up positioning or expose a unit for one turn longer than you should, the AI now capitalizes on it. It's not arbitrary punishment. It's a real consequence of a bad decision. This completely transforms the game's meta. Ambushes and flanking stop being occasional options and become essential survival tools. You can no longer just charge forward in a straight line expecting enemies to react passively. You need to think about cover, sight lines, and how your current move will create a vulnerability in the next turn. It's the kind of depth that makes turn-based combat feel alive rather than mechanical. What impresses me is that this improvement comes gradually and cumulatively. It's not a complete system overhaul. It's consistent refinement with every patch, and that's hard to do well without creating new inconsistencies. The result is a less predictable battlefield, where every mission requires you to truly read the situation. For those who enjoy serious tactics, this is the kind of evolution that justifies coming back to the game after some time away. There's a specific kind of frustration in tactical games that's hard to describe to those who haven't experienced it. You build an entire setup around a weapon, enter the mission, excited, and the moment you try to use the equipment, the game simply crashes. The twin-linked ATGM launcher bug with the Tech SL was exactly that, a combination that looked powerful on paper, but in practice was a game of Russian roulette between working halfway or freezing the match completely. What Patch #6 fixes here is fundamental, because it goes beyond just solving a freeze. When the Tech SL handles heavy weapons correctly, without animation bugs and without mandatory deploy via perk, you can finally explore the real potential of these builds. Heavy weapons on the Tech always made sense thematically and mechanically given the character's profile, but the bugs turned any attempt at using this playstyle into an experience too risky to be worth it in serious missions. The practical result is that new viable builds are truly opening up now. You can plan your loadout, knowing the equipment will behave as it should, and this has a direct impact on how you approach each mission. The fixes to ammo crates and blaster vaults also fall into this, because issues with ammo and secondary equipment are the kind of things that slowly erode confidence in the system even when you aren't paying direct attention to them. What unites all these fixes is something simple but important: respect for the player's time. Heavy weapon bugs aren't just technical inconveniences. They invalidate planning, waste resources, and break the flow of an entire session. When a patch resolves this kind of problem consistently, it's basically saying the game now works the way it was promised. And for a title still in development, maintaining this pace of fixes builds the trust that keeps the community investing. If you played Menace before Patch 6 and developed the habit of keeping your units in stealth all the time, waiting for enemies to run away on their own, I have some bad news for you. That playstyle is dead. And honestly, it deserved to die sooner. Stealth spam was less of a strategy and more of a way to bypass combat entirely, and any victory earned that way had the taste of a result you didn't really win. The AI now ignores hidden units and actively counterattacks, which means staying hidden without a real plan of action no longer protects you, it leaves you vulnerable. If you advance a unit in stealth, expecting the enemy to retreat, they will continue their patrol, flank you, and eventually find you in a worse position than if you had been aggressive from the start. The patch basically removed the option of being passive and lazy at the same time. What this requires of you now is a real decision. Either you use stealth the right way, with smart positioning, calculated ambush timing, and a clear plan of when to reveal your units, or you abandon stealth entirely and go full aggression. Both approaches work. What no longer works is staying in the middle ground, hidden but without a goal, waiting for the game to solve the combat for you. This change is going to hurt some players who built entire squads around stealth perks without thinking about the engagement phase. If you're in that situation, it's time to revise your builds and understand that stealth is now a setup tool, not an automatic win. Menace has become more demanding, and that's a good thing. Tactical games need to punish bad decisions, and patch #6 finally does that consistently. Menace has always had permadeath, but before the patch, you could bypass the most severe consequences with some last-minute improvisation. The less intelligent AI left room to recover from bad positions, regroup units in trouble, and get out of situations that should have ended in disaster. That recovery room has been significantly reduced now, and if you still play with the old mindset that there's always a way to wing it, you're going to learn the hard way. With the AI flanking better and punishing positioning errors, a tactical slip-up that used to cost 1 unit can now result in a complete squad wipe. This is especially brutal in procedural missions, where the map layout isn't predictable and you don't have the luxury of memorizing safe routes. One bad decision on the wrong turn, and you watch your entire squad collapse in a chain reaction before you can even react. For casual players, the real risk here lies in the branching ops of the Wayback System. Failing a branched operation isn't just losing a mission, it's losing progression, closing narrative paths, and sometimes compromising resources that took hours to accumulate. With the more punishing AI, entering these missions without proper preparation has become a truly risky decision. The game isn't going to warn you that you're ill-equipped or poorly positioned. It's simply going to collect the debt. The trap here isn't the difficulty itself. It's the false sense that you're still playing the same Menace as before. If you've returned to the game after a while, or are continuing a campaign started before the patch, be careful with the first impulse to use the same tactics that used to work. Take the time to test the new AI in smaller missions before risking important squads. Permadeath combined with smart AI is a combination that forgives neither laziness nor old meta nostalgia. The Tech SL buff was exciting to see, and I completely understand why the developers went in that direction. Tekobeo Foza is now a force of nature on the battlefield, and testing aggressive builds with him is genuinely fun. The problem is that when a single unit becomes too good compared to the other options, you're no longer choosing your favorite squad leader, you're being pushed toward an obvious choice. And an obvious choice in a tactical game is problematic design. The practical trap is that your other squad leaders now feel outdated without having changed themselves. It's the classic side effect of an excessive buff. Rally or demolitions didn't get weaker. The tech simply rose so high that he made everyone else look slow next to him. For those who had ongoing campaigns built around other SLs, this creates an uncomfortable feeling that your squad became obsolete overnight for no reason related to your own decisions. The grind on the black market to re-equip squads and compensate for this gap is real and will cost time and resources. If you want to keep other SLs competitive, you need to invest in specific perks like Rally for support or Demolitions for area damage, building around the tech's weaknesses rather than simply trying to match his strengths. It's not impossible, but it requires extra planning that wasn't necessary before. The good news is that this kind of imbalance usually gets fixed relatively quickly when it's as evident as this. Until the fix arrives, the best approach is not to abandon your other SLs in desperation, but to identify what each one does that the tech doesn't, and build missions around those specialties. The tech dominates in direct, aggressive confrontation, but a well-equipped support squad leader still changes the outcome of complex operations, where brute force alone won't solve the problem.